like it's here. It's happening. And at such a pace that is on time. So that's the number one question we get, right? When is it complete? So we're on track for an October 2025 completion, which has always been part of the timeline. Actually, next week we're pouring the 5th floor. So once the building came down, once we did excavation, and once we started, I mean, it's going up so quick. I highly recommend, if you're able to come by the site to see it. And I walk by it every day to and from work. Yeah, not because I'm micromanaging, because I live like 5 minutes by, but I get to see it all the time. And every few days it goes by, something new has happened. It's really, really exciting. As far as the money goes, that's the second big question. Is, as you know, it's a $92 million project. The first 4 floors, our goal is $37 million. Happy to say we have $7.8 million left to raise. It's a really great place to be. We have 3 more years left to raise it. We are really in a rhythm from the last 2 years to where we need to go, that I am very confident we're going to get there within the 3 years, even prior. And the point of it being so important that we get to our $37 million goal before that 3-year mark is we don't want a mortgage on our 4 floors. So we've had, the only way that we've gotten to where we've got, of course, is through so many of you who are on this call and many who aren't here, whether it's from your donations, your advocacy, being a champion, your community of faith, your corporation. Cabinet members are on this call for the fundraising campaign. Some board members are on this call with our organization, and others that help us volunteer. We obviously can't do this work without you. So another thing about the redevelopment, which is also exciting, if you were following the news, it was just last Friday, I was at the announcement for what is happening across the street. For years, we have been asking the community what is happening with what was the Salvation Army building and Buddhist temple, if you know what that one is. I don't know if the photo doesn't capture it there, but it is actually going to be redeveloped. Now, 2018, the provincial government announced a 75-unit housing space just on the one lot. They've since expanded the vision. It's actually going to be 4 lots, with the first floor is going to be a clinic for social services and healthcare partnered with the Vancouver Coastal Health, VCH. Above, there will be 200 units of social housing. So I've met with them prior to this, wonderful conversations about the types of partnerships and organizing that our organizations can do, because that corner is going to be so rejuvenated, so exciting. And when I talk about rejuvenation in this context, it doesn't mean gentrification. It actually means not displacing the people that are meant to live here. And it's so thrilling. The other thing that was kind of cool, while we were there was other social service providers at this announcement on Friday. And Minister Kallstrom brought up First United a few times from the podium, and everybody was cheering so loudly for our work. Had all the goosebumps and warm and fuzzies, and it was almost a bit embarrassing, actually. We had so much attention on us, but it was really beautiful to be a part of that. And again, I just want to extend that to all of you folks, that how much trust and credibility this organization has in the community, and that I truly believe the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Health, with VCH is actually being quite genuine in how they want to proceed next steps with this project across the street. I should also mention that 625 Pal Street Foundation, our major funder that propelled our capital campaign forward, was also one of the donors of one of the lots. And so Donald was there speaking as part of the foundation, again, talking about First United and our work and the importance of partnerships and coming together to, really address the complexities we see in this community. So there's so much amazing, important stuff is happening in this community, and all of you are part of making this happen. So thank you so very much. So climate resiliency. I think it's so important we're starting to talk about this more now. The last year, I've had several invitations to join roundtables about what is climate resiliency in vulnerable populations to respond to certain extreme weather, forest fires, etc. Whereas years prior, we haven't convened around that conversation. Often when I'm at that table, though, I often say, as it's beautiful to plan for climate resiliency, but in real time as well, these extremes still happen. The status quo is still extreme with extreme weather, let alone how much more extreme it's going to get. So we need to get the infrastructure right. We need to get it done right now. As Katie was mentioning, there's no better time to talk about the climate when we're coming out of a heat wave. We, as an organization, similar to some of the extreme weather in January, collecting items and distributing, whether it's through our help desk or in Oppenheimer Park, but also helping other organizations that don't have the same reach as we do distribute. You folks are amazing. We get donations. We have such a big reach. And so we also then partner with some other outreach groups so they can also help assist us in different encampments in the downtown east side. So things like sunscreen, full gel packs, water bottles, so many items like that have been distributed. Somebody donated a whole bunch of solar shade panels, those pop-up tents that have been amazing. And so thank you. Part of you are part of our community that helps us do that work. What also happens in extreme weather, before I talk specifically into this slide, is I'll be frank, we witness a lot of tomfoolery by law enforcement in the city. And in the winter, if you are following along, some of our advocacy and encampments and some of the we were seeing officials taking away really life-saving resources like your tent, like shelter. I witnessed some very disturbing moments that were so inhumane. And again, it's happening this week with extreme weather. Something that went viral on social media was a city official, park ranger, confiscated a cooler. No one quite understands why, and it reads very punitive and unnecessary. And we have to remember that these types of resources literally help people stay alive, and that we need different ways to work around how we are treating the unhoused in our communities. And so these types of examples only help to mobilize people in this community further with our advocacy work. And so I always ask of our communities and people on this call to continue that advocacy work with us, because it is unacceptable to be treating our neighbors this way. So as far as climate resiliency goes in the new building, this building can't come soon enough. I can't wait for us to be able to be then responding in this way with the space. So weather obviously poses an extreme risk for our community members, and responding to this urgent need, our new building has been designed with a state-of-the-art HVAC system that's capable of actually handling these extremes. For instance, we're going to meet the Vancouver Coastal Health temperature guidelines. And this HVAC system on level 1, where the entry hall is, the reception, the drop-in, the dining hall, so that whole first floor that can accommodate over 200 people will be able to come in and experience both heating and cooling at these times. What else we have created, which is incredibly special and rare, if not, I don't know if it even exists yet in the downtown east side, is wildfire smoke refuge. So we have also are installing an amazing state-of-the-art air filtration that actually goes throughout the building. So not just the first floor, second and third floor. So we could accommodate up to 500 people, basically when there are wildfire smoke, so people can come in and ensure that they're staying safe and healthy. We basically have dedicated about a quarter of our floor to these type of weather responses, which is great. Not to mention the exterior, we will have trees outlining Hastings and Gore. We can't wait to bring back some shade. If you're in community right now, it is so unacceptable to have the limited of green space that is here and to see people huddling under tiny little places to get shade. We can do better. We also have on our outdoor patio landscaping and shade that we'll be providing. The top level, actually, I don't really talk about this very often, but it has on the building heat absorption, so to help with the summer and retention of heat in the winter. And I think, and also there's solar shading that it will insulate, and the building envelope as well will support energy efficiency and temperature control. I think it's incredibly important when we're building in social housing. We're also recognizing, as we lead with our values, that we also are being environmental stewards as well. I'm so proud of the work that we've done in this building and have ensured that we are also responding environmentally. I think we should all be really proud of that as well. Again, another thing around climate resiliency too, and air conditioning is the access to air conditioners. So you're probably aware of Dr. Sarah Marsden, our Director of System Change and Legal. We've done some work around air conditioning, and if you followed along with the provincial government, their air conditioning program with BC Hydro, last Friday, Sarah and team were out doing outreach, ensuring that people know their rights, that they can install air conditioners, landlords can't say no, but also how do you apply to get an air conditioner. On Friday, when that housing announcement I was at, when I knew Minister Dix was there, I brought one of the pamphlets and gave it to him to share what the team was doing, and he was ecstatic that we're doing that work. And if you know him, he gets very excited about things in his portfolio. And it was great to connect on that and him to be aware we're supporting that program and trying to get them for the government as well. So thanks. With that, I think I'm gonna see you for a bit more about our law firm work, but I'm gonna pass this back to Katie for Katie and Stephanie's time here. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. So I'm going to move on to our interview with Stephanie Kallstrom. I'm sure you folks have a lot of questions after all the great information that Amanda just shared with us. We're going to have time for questions at the end because we just want to make sure that we have a chance to get through all this great content. So bear with me as I shift gears here a little bit. And I'm going to bring myself and Stephanie up on our screens. Just one moment. Okay, there we go. So everybody, like I said, this is Stephanie Kallstrom. She is our case planner. And we're going to have a little conversation about what a day in the life is like for Steph at First United. So hi, Steph. Thanks so much for being here and joining us. Oh goodness, is she mute, frozen? Are you there, Steph?
Yeah.
Ah, great. Excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about your job and how long you've been with First United?
Yeah, I can. I've been here 11 years. I'm in my 11th year now. So I celebrated my work anniversary on May 23rd of this year. And I'm the case planner for the shelter. So I've been doing this job for just under 11 years because I started with First United doing different roles. But basically I do everything client related. So from housing to legal support, to child welfare, financial stability, pensions, referral to complex care and integrated care teams, and then all kinds of case management and coordinating the take-home naloxone program in the shelter.
And so that's a lot of different things. What is an average day like for you at work?
So my first tasks for the day are usually assessing the bed situation. So that is something that we do every morning on the weekdays. And we check if who's missed their bed check, if we've seen them in the past 48 hours, and who do we need to support to maintain their bed in the shelter. So that looks like chatting with all the staff who are here, talking to the shift supervisor, usually the overnight staff. And if we have not seen somebody in 48 hours, we'll usually contact their teams that they're connected to make sure that nobody's losing their bed unnecessarily. Then usually we're reading incident reports. We are doing intakes. So if we do have beds available, that's when we would do intakes at around 9:30, 10 in the morning. And then we do prioritize referrals. So if one of our community partners are referring somebody to the shelter, then we would have them come in, and we sort of maintain an unofficial wait list for that. And then prioritizing hospital referrals for people who have left our shelter and gone to hospital, and then who are coming back.
Okay, and who are some of those community partners outside of the hospitals?
So we work really closely with a bunch of Vancouver coastal health teams, like the intensive case management teams, the assertive community treatment team, Carnegie Outreach is one for sure who we work with really often. Connections Clinic, who is next door to us, who is the Oat Clinic. And the various integrated care teams in the downtown east side, like Pender Clinic, Heatley, and Downtown Community Health Center.
So it sounds like there's a lot of collaboration across service providers that happens.
Yes, definitely. And that's really the best way to serve the people who are staying here.
Totally. Yeah. And what do you think is something that would surprise people about your job?
I mean, I think a lot of things would surprise people, but I would say probably the demographic of people who come to the shelter would be really shocking to folks. I mean, we've had folks who are doctors and lawyers and social workers, real estate agents. I mean, we've had nurses. We've had a lot of people after the pandemic who have lost their housing and jobs because of the pandemic come to our shelter. So this looks like some people who have run through their RRSPs, sold their cars, run through their savings account when they can no longer maintain housing. They have had to come to our shelter. So I think that would be one thing that's really surprising to folks. Another thing is probably how broken our system is. I mean, for example, people get discharged from hospital to our shelter who are way beyond our capacity to care for here. And that looks like folks who can't shower on their own, can't transfer out of a wheelchair on their own, have complex wound care, need IV antibiotics. And it's beyond the skill set of community, and it's beyond the capacity of the shelter to have somebody who needs help transferring, and it's not something that we can do. And it's really a shame that people get discharged to a shelter in that sort of situation when they've maybe even just had surgery. It really causes, I mean, there's a lack of dignity there for the actual client. I think another big one is that when they changed the ID over, I'm sure some of you remember when we could no longer use our care card anymore and we had to get BC Services cards. So the provincial government and ICBC didn't think about people who were homeless. So you couldn't actually have a registered address that was not a residential address on your card, which means that thousands and thousands of homeless people in BC could no longer get ID, which meant that they could no longer get their financial services, open bank accounts, get housing. So we worked with a panel in the downtown east side, which included Carnegie Outreach and the Kettle and some other organizations, and worked with the provincial government to sort of change the process, which took about a year.
That's an incredibly long time. And that must be, I don't know, a huge learning curve too, right? Because it's not like you necessarily had to do that before. It's just this massive issue that arose all of a sudden, and then you have to figure out how to address it to help clients, right?
Yeah, and we didn't know what to do at that time because people were getting cut off their financial services, not able to get pensions and things like that. So it was a big, big hurdle because, of course, the Ministry of Social Development and Poverty Reduction didn't know or understand what ICBC was doing. So we had sort of clients stuck in the middle and us putting out fires on the outside, which were near impossible to put out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is really illustrative. I think you would agree, and I think a lot of the folks on this call would agree that having an emergency shelter, it's a vitally important service. If somebody needs a bed today, they need a bed today. And it's not actually a permanent solution for housing. Like a shelter is not a permanent house. And so can you tell us what it's like helping people find permanent housing and what some of those challenges are?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge is that there are way, way, way too few units available. And I won't put people in the SROs that are in the community that are not dignified. Nobody deserves to live in a place that is infested with bugs and rodents. That's just not going to happen for me. So I work a lot with BC Housing to house people into appropriate housing, and our housing retention is really, really high. I also work with the buildings once people have been housed to make sure that they maintain housing, because obviously it's a whole new set of trauma for somebody to get evicted from housing when they finally secured something that's really positive for them. So we see a lot of things happen when folks are housed. Wounds get better, home support is established and is more consistent. People's mental health has completely changed. And so we see all these positive results when people are being housed and they come back and visit, of course. We also offer meals to folks for 2 weeks after they've been housed, just as a way to sort of bridge the gap, because it's scary to go from a shelter with 52 people to then go to housing where you're alone in your unit, even if the community in the building has meal programs or community spaces. So, I mean, we have priority lists here. So who I house first are definitely women fleeing abuse, because that's a whole kind of different situation. We have a rapid rehousing program. So folks who have been just evicted, we try and rehouse them as quickly as possible. So that's sort of how the priority works. But we really struggle because of the old buildings in the neighborhood, for folks who have mobility aids, because a lot of these buildings are walk-ups.
Yeah, and just like these massive structural challenges
Yes.
of finding the right place for the right person at the right time.
Yes.
Yeah, but it sounds like you do a lot of relationship building. And when we were talking about, you participating in Toast Talks, and when you had shared with me some of what you're going to say, I have to say a lot of this was surprising to me. I didn't know it. Even, being here for a number of years, I'm still continuing to learn about these incredible, really important, really cool things that our team does here. And so what's the best part of your job? Because it sounds hard. There's a lot going on. Really, really challenging sometimes, but where do you find the kind of the enjoyment and the glimmer of hope?
I mean, there's lots of things that I love about my job, but I would say definitely my favorite thing is watching folks accomplish their goals. And that can look like stabilizing their mental health, and that's in shelter, because some people, in order to be housed, need to be housing ready. We don't really work on a housing first umbrella for most folks, unfortunately. People who are moving forward, for example, with visitations with their children now, folks who have gotten wheelchairs, maybe, who didn't have them before. I mean, I have one of my most favorite moments that I've had working here in the past 11 years was when we had a client who was pregnant in shelter and was using substances, who then subsequently detoxed themselves while they were in shelter, and went on to find their own housing and moved out of the community. Unfortunately, when their child was born, the Ministry of Children and Families went to apprehend the child, even though this person had been sober for 8 months. They had the idea that somebody who uses drugs, that they, even if they had changed their lifestyle, could still not take care of a child. This client, who has complex trauma, intergenerational trauma, and has seen probably some of the worst things that you could in your life, sat at a meeting with a social worker. And when the social worker said, "We're going to remove your child," she just looked at me and said, "Why?" And so that was amazing that this person could stay calm in that kind of a situation, but awful because this was the reality of the situation. So through advocacy and conversation with the Ministry of Children and Families on that day, along with Reverend Sally, who I'm sure a lot of you remember, we agreed to supervise the mom for 7 days until the ministry could get an actual worker to do the supervision order, which was very unfortunate to me because it was really disorganized of them. They had one plan, one agenda, one idea, and had nothing set up. So really the consequence was going to be for mom and baby to be separated if First United had not stepped up.
Gosh. And so what was the outcome of that?
So the outcome was that mom and baby are still together. This child is no longer a baby. They are in elementary school. They're doing really, really well. They have great housing, great supports, no substance use. I mean, and this is someone who's faced incredible adversity, and they're doing great. And it was one of my favorite things, and this person still comes and visits us, to see someone succeed. And this is independently from anybody at First United, other than lending a hand, because this is what we do here in the shelter program, is that we assist people in meeting their own goals and having their own agenda and using their own skills to be able to have success.
Oh. Everything you just said, it just really echoes what I've heard from a lot of community members that I've spoken to who have used our services, is that First United really goes above and beyond. Like, and I don't know how many people have said, it's the staff. It's not like, the folks who work here come in and, punch in their time card and then just leave for the day. It's like deep care and going above and beyond to help people. And one of the other surprising things that I learned recently is that you give folks a housewarming gift when residents move into permanent housing. And what kind of gift is that?
Well, everybody gets a quilt. So these beautiful handmade quilts go to each person who has secured housing, and I have them in my office, and everybody gets to choose what they want. And there's so much variety, and it's such a nice gift for somebody to have a piece of First United and some love, because I know that the quilts were made with love, and people love them. It's amazing that they can have something to sort of remember the care that we have in the shelter from all the staff. And it's wonderful that we can add a little bit more to that too, like towels and toothbrush and underwear and socks. And so it becomes like a whole care package for someone who's moving into housing, which is awesome in my mind.
It is. It absolutely is. Thank you so much, Steph, for sharing your stories with us, for all of your incredible work for 11 years, over a decade. You're a really special part of this organization. And I know you've touched many, many, many hearts and souls in this community. And we're so grateful to have you here sharing with us and doing your incredible work every day.
Thank you.
Okay, so again, we'll have some time for some questions afterwards, but those quilts that Steph shared with us, I want to share a little bit about them. So here's some pictures of a couple of the quilts, and these are handmade by members of the St. John's United Church Quilters Group on the Sunshine Coast. And I was bowled over when I heard that we give these gifts to shelter residents when they move into personal or permanent housing. And so just a huge, huge thank you to the quilters at St. John's UC for their incredible support. Really, really special. We're gonna kick it back over to Amanda to share with you a little bit about some of our law reform successes lately. Over to you, Amanda.
Thank you. And thanks, team. Thanks, Stephanie, for your years of service and all that you do for community, echoing all that Katie just said. Appreciate it so much and love that interview segment. Every time I listen to you, I learn more things, hear new stories too. Deeply appreciate it. Law reform, here we go. Are you following us in the news? What's all the stuff that we're up to? You probably are aware that last year we launched our BC eviction mapping project. We wanted to collect the reason people were being evicted and the impacts. And why were we doing this work? Well, you know, for 50 years, we have a legal advocacy team that has done thousands of files, helping community members navigate eviction notices, or actually intervene on behalf of like power imbalances between landlord and tenant. And so after a while, you start to say like, why are these increasing? Why is this happening? Can we do something about it? So we expanded our advocacy team last year to include systems change work. And we knew one of the first things we wanted to do was data collect. The province has never collected data on evictions. So how do you know where they're happening, how they're happening for not collecting data? So we did it for them. We have now had over 1,000 surveys that have come in for people who have experienced an eviction and why across the province. Based on that data, we came together and created law reform recommendations and started to literally lobby the government to make those changes. What was one of the biggest discoveries we made? There were several, but in alignment with some of our recent successes here was around the landlord use evictions. So if a landlord wants to reclaim their property for personal use, they want to move in, their family wants to move in, or they want to sell it, we saw in our data that 60% of evictions are because of this reason. Now, we are a believer, I'm a believer, that if you're a landlord and you own property and in good faith want to reclaim it for your personal use, I say go to town. The sad reality is most of these evictions are done in bad faith. What happens when you are evicted from your place, landlords then can increase the rent, right? And so that is really what we believe is adding to even more unaffordable BC, driving rents up. There are 1 million renters across BC. When we keep getting evicted and can't afford what Stephanie was saying in that spectrum, what really surprises is the demographic. That's what happens. I think it's part of our responsibility when we see on the front lines what is happening to zoom out where we can and start asking bigger questions. And that's what we've been doing. So when we launched the law reform platform with different recommendations in February, with so much information on our website, if you haven't read this document already, about 2 months later in the spring session, Bill 14 was announced by the government to propose amendments to the Residential Tenancy Act, the RTA. That is what's on the screen. And so they have wanted to extend a couple of big ones that I actually want to speak to. You can see what's on the slide is the landlord use web portal. So the government last week announced they're rolling that out starting July 18th. If you read the press release with the government and we're following along the media, First United was included as an endorser to this and also did some media. However, we still know it's not enough. But what we do like about this web-based portal is that you have to provide a notice to end tenancy. We were actually pushing for an application. And what the difference is an application, you have to prove a little bit more, have to get permission before you can evict. This is more what the government's doing because they're balancing different sides, is they're capturing more data. And within that portal, the spirit of it is landlords are to see the actual instructions and repercussions if they are evicting in bad faith. Like their financial penalties are higher, up to a year now, whether they were less before. Another area, which was interesting, whenever media picks up things, what are those sort of like nuanced stories that they really want to know more about? I had to do some media on the extension of notice periods. So what it currently is 2 months. Want to evict somebody, they have 2 months to vacate. The government has expanded that to 4 months. There's actually a lot of flurry around that as realtors and mortgage brokers are concerned that new home owners specifically will have a harder time securing financing. Our response to that is that those actual 2 months, so 4-month period, actually isn't that long, but it's a lot better than 2 months. Can you imagine being evicted? You don't know where you're gonna go, costs are skyrocketing, there's so much community displacement. The rental stock in Vancouver is 0.9%. So having that extra period of time to find a place and hopefully in a community that you want, that meets your financial needs is a huge deal, and this could actually help people more. So we're thrilled about the pace that the government has rolled these items out. There was nothing in place before, really. Of course, there was Residential Tenancy Act. There are renters' rights. We do not think that they are strong enough, though. And this just gives us a signal that the government is listening and recognizes change needs to happen. Where else we want to continue to expand, this is our most big advocacy that we hope that people will come alongside us with is vacancy control. You're probably aware right now that there is rent control tied to a tenant. That's why tenants are getting so evicted. So in order to alleviate that, we want vacancy control tied to a unit. So regardless of someone moves in or out, whether they volunteer to move or were evicted or not, that the rent is tied to that unit. We believe that that will help stabilize rents across this province and stop this outrageous price and rent gouging that is happening across BC. And so that's the type of work we're doing and will continue to do. All of this work that we do comes back to these 3 huge principles you may be seeing in our material or across the city, and how we show up and speak is around dignity, belonging, and justice. When we say dignity, we believe everybody's basic needs need to be aligned with your human rights. How this shows up at First United is access to water, access to food, access to shelter. When we say belonging, what we mean is that you are welcome without judgment. And how this can show up is that there are spaces to gather where you're not shooed away, spaces where you can breathe, where you can worship, where you can do ceremony, where you can say justice. What we mean is restoring our relationships to each other and our systems. And even if that means to break those systems of oppression and poverty, and how this shows up at First United is in our public advocacy work to break stigma and hold people accountable, and also in this law reform work like you see before us to shift legislation and policy through lobbying and data collection and evidence-based work. So without you, appreciate you all, and I know now have a few minutes left for questions.
If you've got a question, feel free to unmute yourself, or you can just pop it into the chat box. I give a question prompt as well. What do you hope to see with the future of First United, with the new building be ready next year? What are you most excited to see?
Can we flip it to the crew to write that in the chat? What are they most excited to see?
I love that. Yes.
Hey team, I would love to know what you are excited to see in the next 2 years with the new building. It's October 2025.
Oh, Susan Burns, it looks like you've raised your hand. Go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, I'm very interested in this huge development that's going to go across the street. And it sounds to me like it's going to be a huge game changer for the downtown east side and for the culture that can be supported down there. And I'm just wondering about some of the hints of that, or how people are seeing it, or how it's being talked about at this point in time, because it, to my mind, is mind-blowing.
Amanda, you want to take this?
Is this a question? So with the new redevelopment across the street, how will that shift, and what is community already saying? Is that the question, Susan?
Yeah, it is.
It was just announced on Friday. But there is a lot of, are they really gonna engage with community? Being frank, like, you know, you come out hot, it's called social washing. Governments do this all the time. Many people do, where you're like, oh, I consulted with someone. They kind of name drop. We're being very mindful that our name is not participating, without actual meaningful, you know, like actual consultation. But I did get a vibe that it was genuine. So it is so new in the process. It will take at least a year to get a demolition permit. They haven't designed it, haven't consulted, don't have an architect. We started May of 2018. I don't want to like suggest that this is gonna, I don't want to say it's gonna take 6 or 8 years. I do not know. But I hope that with the community getting really excited for it, because the initial feedback was excitement, that it will then reflect what the community wants. Some of what is happening has come from my understanding, some reports like Red Women Rising. Actually, First United gifted our reports too from community engagement of what community wanted. And then there's some other reports around the Carnegie project that was just launched about that space specifically. So they have engaged with that, and I think that is promising.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Hi, this is Jean. I have a question. Jean Budden.
Go ahead, Jean.
Has the city, the province done any planning? I gather we're not having private SROs anymore. So there's going to be across the street. There's going to be affordable housing. So is there some system in place by the government to make sure we don't have private SROs, which end up what we've seen historically being horrendous places, but rather have SROs, I've heard the word dignity quite a few times today, SROs which provide dignity. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, the government is very keen on shifting us away from SROs. I'm just looking at the province's belonging in BC homelessness plans to add 4,000 new supportive housing units and around 240 complex care spaces province-wide. Stephanie's still on this call. If you do the math, there's a lot more than 4,000 homeless people across BC though. And so when you think of there are 99 private SROs in Vancouver, and you think about what Stephanie was mentioning around in the summer, how hot they are, and that's why encampments also we see an increase. People don't want to be in them. The government's really aware of it, and they're trying really hard to build more housing and not have SROs as a solution. Build more. Actually, and also it's often not just about building more, it's about shifting the housing stock conversation. Like, how are we actually maximizing units already built? They're just so unaffordable.
So it's about 5:18 here, and I know we promised that we would get this all kind of wrapped up by 5:15. So if you do have to leave, feel free to, but maybe time for one more question if anybody has one.
Mine is not a question, but a comment, just to say that I find this quite inspirational to listen to. There's so many aspects of housing and the difficulties that I don't have much awareness about, and to hear the work that you're doing is inspirational indeed. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Thank you, Marvin. Really appreciate that. All right, well, if any questions do come to mind, you can always send us a message at info@firstunited.ca. We're very, very happy to answer that for you. And just before we log off, so as you know, we do a draw for attendees at Toast Talks for a $25 gift card from our friends at Terra Breads. And I'm very happy to say that Peggy Jensen, you have won this time's gift card. And so our staff will be in touch with you and make sure we have your right address on file. We'll pop that in the mail for you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. It was such a pleasure to see you, to chat with you. Really appreciate all of your ongoing support of our work, and we'll see you in the fall for the next edition of Toast Talks.
Thank you. Oh, that was great.
Yeah.
Good
Take
meeting.
care, everyone.
Bye.
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 Hi. Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph.
Oh, hi,
You're
Gary.
welcome.
Oh,
Thank you, Katie. And
No
Amanda
problem.
and
Thanks,
Steph.
Gary.
Yeah, no, it's just great. Really great.
Thank you.